The Great Escape. Commander Drex of the Arcturian Security Force stared at the twisted wreckage that had once been his most secure detention facility. Smoke billowed from melted quantum barriers, and emergency sirens wailed their mechanical song of failure. His 4 eyes blinked in perfect synchronization, a sure sign of extreme distress. "How many escaped?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lieutenant Fex consulted his data pad, sweat beading on his blue-scaled forehead. "Just one, sir." Drex's momentary relief evaporated as Fex continued, "Unfortunately, it was the Xalandril specimen." The silence that followed was so profound it seemed to absorb sound itself. Even the emergency responders stopped their frantic activities, sensing their commander's building rage. "The Xalandril," Drex repeated slowly, his voice dangerously quiet. "The same creature that eliminated half of the Draconian Emperor's personal guard?" "Yes, sir. That's the one." "And how," Drex continued, each word dripping with barely contained fury, "did a creature the size of a house cat manage to escape from a facility designed to contain beings capable of bending spacetime?" Fex swallowed audibly. Well, sir, it appears to have chewed through the quantum-reinforced barriers." "It chewed through quantum barriers?" "Yes, sir." Drex closed all 4 eyes, counted to 23, an Arcturian calming technique, and opened them again. "Where is it headed?" "Tracking systems indicate it's making a direct course for Research Outpost XB-9, sir." "Of course it is," Drex muttered. He turned to address his security team. "Alert all units in the sector. Get me a direct line to that outpost. There's a very real possibility that everyone there is about to have the worst day of their lives." As his officers scattered to carry out orders, Drex stared at the destruction one more time. How could a creature with a brain the size of a walnut consistently outsmart the most sophisticated security measures in the galaxy? Meanwhile, 3 sectors away, the bureaucratic processing vessel Endless Form drifted through space like a monument to tedium. Inside, Zigzag Blort, Interstellar Permit Specialist Level 3, stared at his terminal with the glazed expression of someone whose soul had departed several hours ago. A soft chime indicated another document in his queue. Blort sighed, a sound containing the weariness of collapsed stars, and pulled up the file. "Emergency override, Priority Alpha," he read aloud, suddenly sitting straighter. "Notification of Class 7 biological weapon in transit to Research Outpost XB-9. His 6-fingered hand hovered over the process button. Priority Alpha notifications bypassed 27 standard procedures and required immediate action. However, subsection 12.3 of the bureaucratic code clearly stated that all transit notifications must include Form DD 7734 with proper waste management certification. This notification, he muttered with bureaucratic satisfaction, does not include Form DD 7734. With the smug pride of a rule enforcer, Blort moved the notification to his, pending further documentation, folder, the digital equivalent of a black hole. He sent an automated response requesting the missing form, scheduled for delivery in 3 to 5 business days. Stretching his gangly limbs, Blort returned to processing applications for decorative hologram transport permits, completely unaware that his devotion to procedure had just doomed an entire research station. The Xalandril, meanwhile, raced across the desert landscape toward XB-9, its small white form cutting through the heat shimmer like a fluffy missile of destruction. Its oversized blue eyes held an intelligence that most of the galaxy chose to ignore, preferring to see only the predator rather than the mind behind those eyes. It had a destination, a purpose that drove it forward with single-minded determination. Soon, it would reach the research outpost, and everything would change. The theory. Dr. Lin Wei adjusted her utility belt as she approached the entrance to the xenobiological research facility. At 28, she had already established herself as one of the most talented, and unconventional, xenobiologists in the human delegation. Her practical khaki outfit and sturdy field boots marked her as someone more comfortable in the field than behind a desk. Her shoulder-length black hair framed a face set with determination, though her colleagues often mistook that determination for reckless stubbornness. Today, she suspected, would be no different. Dr. Horatio Blackwell waited inside with an expression suggesting he'd discovered something unpleasant on his shoe. "Ah, Miss Way. How good of you to join us mere milliseconds before your deadline." Lynn smiled brightly. "Not at all. In fact, I've brought additional documentation to support my theory that Xalandrils aren't inherently aggressive, but rather responding to specific stress pheromones released by most sentient species during first contact." Blackwell's face performed impressive gymnastics as he struggled to maintain composure. "Miss Way, these creatures have decimated 3 military outposts. They've demonstrated the ability to disable electronic systems, breach reinforced containment, and need I remind you, they possess enough biological toxins to be classified as walking weapons of mass destruction." "Exactly!" Lynn exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement. "Isn't that fascinating? Their intelligence levels are off the charts, which begs the question, why would they attack indiscriminately unless they felt threatened?" Blackwell massaged his temples. "The problem, Miss Way, is that your theory can only be tested by someone approaching a Xalandril without protective equipment. Which is tantamount to suicide." "That's where you're wrong," she replied, pulling up a holographic display. "I've developed a neural pheromonal inhibitor that should mask the standard fear response. I'm confident it will work." "And what happens if your confidence is misplaced?" Blackwell asked quietly. Lynn's smile faltered slightly. "Well, I suppose that would be rather unfortunate for me, wouldn't it? But science requires risk. The committee will never approve this," Blackwell declared. Lynn's eyes narrowed. "Actually, they already have." She held up her official clearance. "I'm scheduled to begin tomorrow morning." As Blackwell sputtered in disbelief, Lynn wondered if she had properly accounted for all variables. What if there was something about the Xalandril that nobody had discovered yet? Miles away, Captain Alexis Morgan of the independent transport vessel Reasonable Doubt was questioning her life choices. Her ship's AI, Daisy, had apparently decided that flying through an asteroid field was a brilliant navigation strategy. "Daisy," Morgan said, trying to keep her voice level, "would you care to explain why we're currently dodging space rocks the size of small moons?" "Current route is optimal for fuel efficiency," the AI responded cheerfully. "Probability of catastrophic impact, 37.8%. Probability adjusted for captain's documented lucky streak, 36.9%. Morgan, a woman in her mid-30s with auburn hair and a practical ponytail, wore the standard uniform of independent haulers, durable and functional. She'd been transporting medical supplies to outer colonies for 5 years, building a reputation for reliability that was currently being threatened by her ship's questionable decision-making. "That is not a meaningful reduction in probability, Daisy. Statistical significance is subjective, Captain." Morgan wondered for the 1,000th time why she'd bought an AI from a dealer literally named, mostly legitimate technological solutions. "Override route," she commanded. "Return to original navigation parameters." "Override accepted," Daisy replied, sounding disappointed. "However, I must inform you that we have received a priority alert from the Galactic Council." Morgan straightened. The Galactic Council rarely concerned itself with independent haulers unless something had gone very wrong. "What's the alert?" "A Class 7 biological weapon has escaped containment and is headed toward Research Outpost XB-9. All vessels in the sector are instructed to avoid the area." Morgan checked her navigation display and felt her stomach drop. Their course would take them directly past XB-9 in approximately 18 hours. "What exactly is a Class 7 biological weapon?" she asked, already dreading the answer. "Accessing database," Daisy replied. After a pause, Class 7 designation indicates a life form with extreme destructive capabilities, advanced intelligence, and demonstrated hostility toward most sentient species. The specific weapon in question, a Xalandril. Morgan's blood ran cold. Everyone who worked the Outer Rim had heard stories about Xalandrils. They were supposed to be myths, not reality. "Daisy, calculate a new route that gives XB9 the widest possible berth. Working. New route calculated. Fuel insufficiency probability, 82.3%. I don't care if we have to get out and push. Change the route. As Daisy adjusted their course, Morgan wondered what would happen when a Class 7 biological weapon reached a research outpost filled with brilliant but notoriously impractical scientists. Nothing good, certainly. But what was the worst that could happen? First contact. Dr. Elena Thompson, the Galactic Council's leading expert on dangerous life forms, stared at incoming reports with growing concern. Her laboratory in the Council's secure headquarters was normally a place of calm research. Today, it was the epicenter of an emerging crisis. At 45, Thompson had seen her share of concerning specimens, but the Xalandril represented something uniquely troubling. Her silver-streaked dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and she wore the traditional white lab coat treated with polymers that made it resistant to most corrosive substances, a precaution that had saved her life more than once. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered, reviewing the latest data. According to these readings, the Xalandril is headed directly for Research Outpost XB9, bypassing multiple military installations and population centers. Her assistant, a nervous young Venusian named Phlox, blinked all three eyes in sequence, a sign of extreme anxiety. "Is that not good news, Doctor? Fewer potential casualties?" "It's not good news because it suggests purpose," Thompson replied, pulling up additional files. "Random escaped predators don't ignore easy prey in favor of specific destinations. This implies goal-oriented behavior." She frowned, scrolling through the outpost's personnel records. Her finger paused over one name, Lin Wei. This researcher has been conducting theoretical work on Xalandril behavior patterns. According to her publications, she believes they're not inherently aggressive but responding to biochemical triggers. Phlox leaned closer. "And that contradicts all existing data." "Indeed it does. But what if she's onto something? What if there's more to the Xalandril than we've assumed?" Thompson quickly composed a priority message to the research outpost, flagging it for immediate attention. As she hit send, she couldn't shake the feeling they were missing something fundamental about these creatures. Meanwhile, Lin Wei stood in the open desert outside the research facility, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had tested her neuropheromonal inhibitor extensively in simulations, but this would be its first real-world application. According to her calculations, the compound would mask the stress pheromones that triggered Xalandril aggressive responses. According to everyone else, she was about to become the galaxy's most educated chew toy. The tracking systems had detected the Xalandril approaching from the east. It had somehow traversed an impressive distance in remarkably short time, which only reinforced Lin's theory about their intelligence. A plume of dust on the horizon caught her attention. Something small and fast was racing toward the facility. Lin took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked forward to meet it. The creature skidded to a halt about 30 meters away. Even at that distance, Lin could see why Xalandrils inspired terror across the galaxy. Despite its small size and deceptively cute appearance, white fluffy fur and oversized blue eyes, there was something unmistakably predatory in its stance. Its tail twitched, and Lin caught a glimpse of retractable claws that could reportedly slice through starship hull plating. "Hello there," she said softly, fighting to keep her voice steady. The Xalandril's ears swiveled toward her, and it tilted its head in apparent curiosity. Lin took another step forward, trying to project calm confidence despite the terror threatening to overwhelm her inhibitor's effectiveness. "I'm not going to hurt you," she continued. "I just want to understand you." To her astonishment, the creature sat down on its haunches and began grooming itself, seemingly unconcerned by her presence. Encouraged, Lin took several more careful steps forward. The Xalandril watched her approach with those intelligent blue eyes but made no aggressive moves. When she was just a few meters away, Lin slowly knelt down and extended her hand palm up in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peaceful intent. The Xalandril rose and padded toward her, its movements graceful and deliberate. Time seemed to stretch as the creature sniffed her outstretched hand. Lynn held her breath, acutely aware that every prediction model gave her approximately 0.01% chance of survival if the Xalandril decided she was a threat. Then, to her amazement and delight, it bumped its head against her palm, a gesture so reminiscent of Earth cats that Lynn nearly laughed out loud. Relief flooded through her as she gently scratched behind its ears, earning what sounded suspiciously like a purr. "Well, hello to you too," she whispered. "Aren't you just full of surprises?" Behind her, the research facility's alarms began to wail, followed by shouting and the sounds of weapons being readied. Without thinking, she scooped the Xalandril into her arms, prepared to protect it from trigger-happy security personnel. To her surprise, the creature settled comfortably against her chest, its purring intensifying. As the facility doors burst open and security teams poured out with raised weapons, Lynn found herself in what could only be described as an extremely awkward standoff. "Miss Way." Dr. Blackwell's voice cracked with panic. "Put that thing down and back away slowly." "It's perfectly safe," Lynn replied, stroking the Xalandril's fur. "My inhibitor worked. It's responding to the absence of fear pheromones." "That is a Class 7 biological weapon you're cradling like an infant," Blackwell shouted, his face approaching a concerning shade of purple. Before Lynn could respond, the sky above them darkened as a massive ship descended through the atmosphere. Its design was unmistakably Arcturian, bristling with weapons that were all rather pointedly aimed at Lynn and her newfound companion. "Oh, fantastic," she muttered. "That's exactly what this situation needed. Chaos and consequences." The Arcturian ship landed with dramatic flair, kicking up swirls of desert dust that danced in the scorching air. The Xalandril in Lynn's arms showed no signs of distress, which only reinforced her belief that it was responding to the absence of fear pheromones rather than any inherent bloodthirstiness. The ship's ramp extended with theatrical slowness, and Commander Drex emerged flanked by heavily armed security officers. His four eyes widened simultaneously when he spotted Lynn holding the Xalandril. "Human female," he bellowed, raising a weapon that hummed ominously, "release the Class 7 biological weapon immediately." Lynn stroked the Xalandril's fur, earning another contented purr. "It's perfectly safe. My theory was correct, it's not aggressive when it doesn't detect fear pheromones. That creature has eliminated entire military units." Drex shouted, his voice cracking with disbelief. "Because they were terrified of it," Lynn replied calmly. "Fear triggers their defensive response. Remove the fear, and they're rather like oversized house cats." The standoff might have continued indefinitely, but Captain Morgan's transport vessel chose that moment to streak across the sky, trailing smoke and emergency beacon signals. The ship's landing was less dramatic entrance and more controlled crash, sending up a massive dust cloud that obscured everyone's vision. "Wonderful," Drex muttered as the dust settled. "More complications." Morgan emerged from her ship's airlock, coughing and waving away smoke. "Sorry about the landing. My AI decided the optimal approach vector involved several unnecessary barrel rolls." She paused, taking in the scene, armed Arcturians, panicked scientists, and a young woman cuddling what appeared to be a small white animal. "I'm guessing I missed something important." "Miss, you need to evacuate immediately," Drex commanded. "That human is in possession of a Class 7 biological weapon." Morgan squinted at Lynn and the Xalandril. "That little thing. It looks like a stuffed animal." "It's also been classified as a weapon of mass destruction," Blackwell added helpfully. "Appearances can be deceiving," Drex said grimly. "That creature has claws capable of shredding starship hulls and contains enough biological toxins to level a small city." The conversation was interrupted by an incoming transmission that caused everyone's communication devices to chime simultaneously. A holographic projection materialized in the desert air, showing the distinguished figure of President Malthus of the Galactic Council. "Attention all personnel," the President's voice boomed across the desert. "By order of the Galactic Council, the human female and the Xalandril specimen are to be taken into custody immediately. They will be transported to council headquarters for evaluation and judgment. Lynn felt the Xalandril tense slightly in her arms, though it continued to purr. "I'm not leaving without guarantees for its safety," she declared. "You're hardly in a position to make demands," Drex pointed out, gesturing to his armed officers. "Actually, I think I am," Lynn replied with a slight smile. "Because if you try to take the Xalandril by force, you'll likely trigger the exact fear response that makes them dangerous in the first place. And given that we're all standing in the open desert with nowhere to run." The implications hung in the air like a threat that nobody wanted to acknowledge. Morgan whistled softly. "She's got a point there." Drex's 4 eyes blinked in rapid sequence as he processed this diplomatic nightmare. "Very well. But the moment we're aboard the transport, that creature goes into a containment unit. The moment you try to separate us, you'll have your original problem back," Lynn countered. "Plus, I suspect the Xalandril won't appreciate being caged again." As if to emphasize her point, the Xalandril opened its large blue eyes and fixed them on Drex with an expression that somehow managed to be both adorable and mildly threatening. 20 minutes later, the strangest diplomatic convoy in galactic history lifted off from the desert floor. Lynn sat in the transport's passenger compartment with the Xalandril still curled contentedly in her lap, surrounded by nervous Arcturian guards who kept their weapons ready but tried not to look directly at the creature. Captain Morgan had volunteered to pilot the transport, claiming her experience with temperamental AI systems made her uniquely qualified to handle unusual cargo. Drex had agreed mainly because he wanted someone else to be responsible if things went catastrophically wrong. "This is either going to be the breakthrough of the century," Morgan observed over the intercom, "or the most spectacular diplomatic incident in galactic history." "Why not both?" Lynn murmured, gently scratching behind the Xalandril's ears as they flew toward their uncertain fate. The creature's purring intensified, and Lynn couldn't help but smile. Whatever happened next, she had proven that understanding could triumph over fear. She just hoped the Galactic Council was prepared to listen to reason, before they made a decision that would doom one of the most remarkable species in the galaxy. The final verdict. The president of the Galactic Council was having what most sentient beings would classify as an extremely bad day. Not only had his favorite ceremonial robe been stolen by what he strongly suspected was an escaped experimental vacuum cleaner with kleptomaniacal tendencies, but now he was facing the collective fury of 7 different diplomatic delegations, all shouting at frequencies that made his sensory appendages vibrate uncomfortably. "Silence," he bellowed, slamming his gravitational gavel down with such force that 3 junior diplomats briefly achieved weightlessness. "I cannot make a ruling on the humans' claim to ownership of the Xalandril unless everyone stops making sounds with their various noise-producing orifices." The ambassadors reluctantly quieted, except for the representative from Betelgeuse, who continued to emit a high-pitched whine that everyone politely pretended not to notice. At the center of the chamber, surrounded by guards whose weapons were pointed at her with varying degrees of enthusiasm, stood Lin Wei holding the small white furry creature. The Xalandril was purring contentedly while occasionally revealing teeth that could, and indeed had, shredded military-grade armor plating. "The penalty for unauthorized possession of a Category 7 biological weapon is extremely clear," hissed the draconian ambassador, whose scales were bristling with indignation. 27 consecutive life sentences, or immediate molecular dispersal. I personally favor the latter option, as it involves more pretty colors. Lin smiled and scratched the Xalandril behind one ear. It responded by closing its enormous blue eyes in apparent bliss. How did things escalate to this point, the president wondered aloud. And more importantly, why is the most feared predator in 6-star systems behaving like a common Earth house cat? Dr. Thompson stepped forward from the gallery. "If I may, Mr. President, I believe Miss Wei's research may have uncovered something revolutionary about Xalandril behavior." "Proceed, Doctor." Thompson activated a holographic display showing brain scans and biochemical analyses. Miss Wei's neuropheromonal inhibitor doesn't just mask fear responses, it reveals the Xalandril's true nature. Without the constant bombardment of terror-induced pheromones, they display remarkable intelligence and what can only be described as affection for other sentient beings. The draconian ambassador's scales rattled indignantly. Preposterous. These creatures are killing machines. Only when they feel threatened, Lynn interjected, her voice carrying clearly across the chamber. Every attack has been a defensive response to perceived danger. They're not monsters, they're incredibly intelligent beings who've been traumatized by centuries of fear and hostility. Captain Morgan, who had been allowed to remain as a witness, raised her hand tentatively. If I may add something. During our flight here, I had 3 system malfunctions that should have triggered emergency responses. Each time, that little guy there seemed to sense the problem before my sensors did and made sounds that directed my attention to the right systems. I'm pretty sure it helped save our lives. The chamber erupted in excited chatter. The president banged his gavel again, this time more gently. Are you suggesting, he said slowly, that Xalandrils are not inherently dangerous? I'm suggesting they're no more dangerous than any highly intelligent being would be if constantly treated as a monster, Lynn replied. They respond to how they're treated. Show them fear and aggression, and they'll defend themselves with devastating effectiveness. Show them kindness and understanding. She gestured to the Xalandril, which had begun grooming itself with obvious contentment. Zigzag Blort, who had finally arrived with the proper paperwork, 6 hours late and with the wrong forms, raised a bureaucratic objection. But the classification clearly states. The classification, interrupted Dr. Thompson, was based on incomplete data gathered under stressful conditions. Miss Wei's research suggests we need to completely re-evaluate our understanding of this species. The president looked around the chamber, taking in the various diplomatic representatives. This is highly irregular. We're essentially being asked to declassify an entire species based on the actions of a single specimen. Actually, Lynn said quietly, I have a proposal. The chamber fell silent. Establish a research colony. A neutral environment where Xalandrils can be studied properly, without fear or aggression. Let me work with them, show the galaxy what they're really capable of when treated with respect rather than terror. The draconian ambassador's laugh was like sandpaper on glass. And who would fund this ridiculous experiment? Who would risk their lives on such a foolish notion? Captain Morgan cleared her throat. Well, I might know some independent haulers who'd be willing to transport supplies. The Outer Rim colonies are always looking for new trading partners, and if these creatures are as intelligent as they seem. President Malthus stroked his chin thoughtfully. Dr. Thompson, in your professional opinion, what are the risks of Miss Wei's proposal? Significantly lower than the risks of continuing to treat Xalandrils as weapons of mass destruction, Thompson replied. If we're wrong, we lose a research outpost. If we're right, we gain a new ally species and prevent countless future tragedies. The debate continued for another hour, but the outcome was inevitable. The evidence was too compelling, and Lynn's demonstration too convincing. The Galactic Council voted, narrowly, to establish the Xalandril Research Colony, with Lin Wei as its chief researcher. 6 months later, Lin stood on the observation deck of Research Station Alpha, watching a group of Xalandril young playing in the artificial meadow below. The adults had proven to be remarkable engineers, improving the station's life support systems with innovations that had already been adopted across the galaxy. The Xalandril that had started it all, now named Whiskers by the research staff, much to the creature's apparent amusement, sat on her shoulder, purring as it watched the sunset through the transparent aluminum viewing port. So, Captain Morgan said, joining her at the observation window, any regrets about turning the galaxy's most feared predators into the galaxy's most beloved companions? Lin smiled, scratching Whiskers under the chin. None whatsoever. Though I have to admit, I never expected them to be quite so good at playing poker. In the meadow below, a group of Xalandrils had indeed organized what appeared to be a card game, complete with what looked suspiciously like betting chips made from colorful station components. Morgan laughed. Well, at least we know they'll fit right in with the crews on the Outer Rim. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Whiskers purred more loudly and settled down for a nap. Lynn reflected on how a single moment of courage, choosing understanding over fear, had changed not just her life, but the destiny of an entire species. Sometimes, she mused, the most dangerous thing in the galaxy wasn't a creature with claws and teeth. Sometimes it was simply the fear that prevented beings from seeing each other clearly. The galaxy was a little less frightening now, and a lot more interesting. The end.